Yes, thanks, Amos. Good morning, everyone. And for those of you who may not know me, I'm Sam Gibney, and I'm the Executive Director of the Port. And I have listened in on some of these advisory group meetings, but I've not regularly attended. Just letting the staff and the advisory committee do their work as we start to distill down some of the data that we've received and some of the ideas. So from this point forward, I'll be becoming more involved as we start taking some of the options that you've helped us to sort through and present to the commission. So you'll start seeing me a little bit more as we move through the process. The other thing I'd wanted to inform you of is on Monday, the commission took an action to add some additional members to this advisory group, and for a total of, I believe it was 9 in total. And so even though we're only scheduled to have one additional, this is the last meeting of this group, the commission we will be speaking next week at our work session, and we are likely going to extend this process just a bit, really making sure that we have ample opportunity for a representative group of the community to make their views known, and importantly as well to make sure that we have a couple times where the staff can bring back our work to date in the process and get input from the commission. So we'll be working on that schedule and how we hope to extend it. You know, I know that in making this request of you to participate in this process, we set out the number of meetings, and so we will likely be asking if you'd be willing to attend a couple more meetings, and I hope that all of you can. I recognize that you're all very, very busy people, and yet this is a really important course charting exercise for us that will determine really what the actions and of the port are, and how we can collaborate with the community for quite some time to come. So we wanted to just slow down the process just a bit and make sure that we're giving ourselves ample time to incorporate the community input and touch base with the commissioners. So you'll be seeing some of that action here in the coming days, and we'll keep you informed as to what that schedule would look like. So other than that, I'll turn it back over to Amos, and he can present what we've learned so far.
All right, thanks, Sam. So welcome new members. Go through the kind of project status update and a little bit of recap to maybe get you up to speed about where the project had been, where it's headed. This is our org chart, as you're all aware of. And then advisory group members. So this is the current list. We'll be adding new members to this as well. And then we have our select stakeholders. So we initially reached out to 3, Arbutus, the Olympia area rowing, as well as Batdorf and Bronson. Discussion with the commissioners, we added a few more, including Helen Wheatley, a representative from Harbor Days, as well as the Sierra Club. So they've also had some opportunity to weigh in on this as well. Project status, we're out here. Just like Sam was saying, our last public outreach meeting is coming up on the 20th. And just basically summarizing what we've heard and preparing to wrap up for our final presentation to the commissioners. That will be on February 8th. Kind of a refocus on what the original vision was. So taking the Port's 2050 vision plan and their goals for this effort of a maritime terminal waterfront community assets, business development, and sustainability. So there's certain goals that were established from that 2050 vision plan that we're still trying to meet and obtain. So you can go back to the Port's website and see some of that information from our original PowerPoint. That was our outreach number 1. Some potential uses we talked about: a hotel on one of the sites, an RV the administration building site for the port. This is an example of something generated, doesn't have necessarily going to be this, but just an example of what that might look like. Another axon view of that. Parking, that was something else we also had to address. think, sorry, did I skip over an RV site was another, didn't get included. An RV site was another example of something that we're looking at for these sites. So then other components of this development plan, we have the walk, the trail, the Billy Frank Jr. Trail that terminates in a park out at the point. So we're continuing to integrate that and recommend maybe upgrades or improvements to that as the project moves forward. Something that was part of the last outreach was basically what the port can and can't do, their mission statement, got into some municipal codes and regulations that the port must follow. We explained upon that, as well as some of the zoning, this being an urban waterfront zone, what we can and can't do on these particular sites, as well as just setbacks and height requirements that we must meet per the municipal code for the city of Olympia. Parking is another example of just some of the parking that we have to meet. So getting into community feedback, we've already, Rachel did a great job of summarizing all of the information gathered from survey number 1. That was a lot of data, 440 some responses. I think there were 7 to 9 questions, and a lot of that was open-ended type questions. So there's a lot of information that we had to wade through and get some feedback. And again, Rachel did a great job kind of boiling that down. Yeah, 442 responses. This is kind of overall experience rating. So right there in that fair, good, great margin, which is good to hear. We did take some of the needs improvement comments and tried to include those in our other surveys and outreach methods. So just got a brief summary of what we've learned. This is the respondent location. This is survey number 1. So we're looking at, I think that says 81 respondents were from the downtown area or West Olympia. That's a majority of those, and some other rural areas and even out of town areas. People were involved in this survey. A lot of people were familiar with the 2050 vision plan, which is good to know. And then since then, we've also shared links to that information so they can kind of get up to speed on that. And then the survey question, what is the hope the Waterfront Destination Development Plan will achieve? A lot of that would be a community hub or tourist attraction. 138 where they want open space, recreation and access to the water, business center, environmental aspects, a few things like housing, sailing center, industrial use for other components that the public wanted to include. Some development opportunities that we should consider, a lot of that focused around that kind of arts and entertainment and business, public access, sailing center, recreation, housing, and then down to like 20 or fewer respondents included things like lodging, RV park, some environmental education, transportation, and then light industrial. So kind of focused on what can we do to meet the majority of those considerations or recommendations. And this question in regard to ways we can provide access, public water access. I don't know how many of the advisory group were able to take the survey, so you probably kind of familiarize with these questions, but it's nice to see the response to them. But a lot of that had to do with environmental, community sailing, public access, extending the walking trail, and small boat resources. A lot of people wanted to see a way to get a small boat out onto the water without having to use the boat launch dock. And this question about how the area should look in 30 years. So 86 respondents wanted public access, mostly access to the water, public access for those facilities, small business type facilities, environmental, mixed compatible uses, 41 respondents there, recreation, tourism, educational, housing, and then a few other things like event, lodging, no change, so someone just leave it as is. Dog park was another one that interestingly came up a couple times. What opportunities would benefit the community? Again, kind of this theme of public access and amenities. A lot of community wanted some sort of public access along this development plan. educational museum, businesses, small local business, arts and entertainment, sailing center, a little over 30 respondents. We're looking at that as an option. Small boat rental, so getting people out on the water. Event, community conference space, recreation, environmental, tourism, housing. Again, just kind of starts to taper off to even agricultural, which I'm not sure if that's something we can look at. It's pretty minor. Then how do you envision this area looking in 30 years? What's your hope for the area long term? So a lot of open-ended type comments. Rachel again boiled this down, so we tried to get the essence of what the trends were. So there was a lot of comments. If there was a lot of similar trends or ideas that we came across, that information would be documented. The one-off type comments would be they're documented. They're just not brought up to the kind of the forefront, if you will. So the big things that came off were collaborations. They wanted a way for us to collaborate locally with community, with local jurisdiction, to make sure it's a cohesive kind of collaborative effort. Maintain awareness of impacts from sea level rise. So again, this area is right there on the waterfront, and there are certain basically issues that need to be addressed for the sea level rise. So we just make sure we're aware of that, and that's included into the individual plans for each site. Community multi-use space. Example might be maritime, environmental, cultural. So these are some features that the public wanted to see. Ensure environmental and financial sustainability. So how can the port be financially sustainable and environmentally sustainable on these particular projects? Outdoor public space. Again, dog parks, that was one of the trends that we saw. Others were concerns about the tourism accommodations, as well as concerns about proposed use within the context of each site. So we've broken this overall development plan into the separate sites that we've talked about. So the public just wanted to make sure that there's the right use was located on each of those sites. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this study. So that was the results of survey 1. Survey 2 is out. So if you as advisory members have not had a chance to look at that survey, please do so. Or if you need a link back to that survey, feel free to send me an email. I'll send it back out to you. It does close on the 21st as of 10 p.m. So you still have some time to do that. Looking at it this morning, there were 200 responses so far. So we're getting some good data from that. This is a kind of boiled down version or a kind of snapshot of the survey. So just wanted to go through what's currently out there and what kind of feedback we're getting from the public. So this question, thinking about access to water, rank the following images 1 to 4, 1 being most preferred, 4 being the least preferred. So looking at ways the public can access the water, like a stepped bulkhead, for example, or a small watercraft launch. That was one thing that did come up in survey number 1. A bench wall, or even the promenade or boardwalk, as we see as personal landing there in the bottom right. How important is a park with children's play structure for any of these sites? So again, this is back to public amenities. What can we do to increase public use within these areas and locations, and taking that down to a kind of kid-friendly version as well. Which of these potential shoreline improvements options do you prefer most? Again, this is relating back to the waterfront, what we can do to increase what is currently there or improve upon that. If that's a bulkhead seawall, living shoreline, that was something that came up quite often, rocks, or even a reinforced earth method or application. Ranking order of preference of styles of architecture that would be best suited for this area. So we went through, picked out a few images representing different architectural styles, and are asking the public, give us some feedback on what styles you'd like to see there. We're not necessarily saying these particular styles have to be used. It's just trying to get a trend of what it is that the public would like to see. So moving forward, we can make those suggestions for individual lots or locations. Whoa, that was not the right button, sorry. 1 second. All right, we're back. So please select top 5 images relating to paths and connectors. So this is back to how we're going to get people from downtown to connect back to this destination waterfront plan. Some of those features might be a boardwalk, combined pedestrian bike path where they're both in the same route or path, crushed stone, which currently is what we're seeing now on that path, a paved infill, path that's maybe close to or infilled with some development nearby between it and the street to the water there. Landscaped, another option, lots of landscape and greenery. An open concrete path, so it might be a slight step up from what you see currently with the crushed stone. Pavers, some nice features, kind of helps give it a little more character or style for the current path. Separated, so we have a walking path separated by perhaps a bicycle path. Paved and open, it's another type of path that might be considered for this. And then tree lined, kind of this colonnade of trees, kind of encouraging people to peek down the path and see where it leads you. Another question, what are your top 2 preferred options for an event gathered space? So again, here we're looking at potential uses or features that we can add out throughout the development that might provide some small scale gathering or even large scale gathering space for the public. If that's like an open concrete plaza that people can gather with, scattered with benches or other amenities, covered wood, so there's something, the Rose Pavilion at Priest Point Park, a nice Pacific Northwest style wood structure, or a covered steel facility where you can get some picnic tables and some garbage cans in there to meet. Indoor enclosed, so a facility where it is out of the weather. This I could see as something included in other mixed use type buildings. So it could be a meeting space that could be rented out for public events. Opened or crushed stone, again, they have that crushed stone path currently, but if there's an open plaza type space, a little more quaint feeling, less harsh than say a hard concrete. So we're just looking for feedback from the public on those. And then regarding potential gateways or connectors between the waterfront development area and downtown Olympia, we asked the public to rate the following. So we're looking at something that is iconic that can pull the public again from the downtown to the waterfront development area. So if it's some sort of informational signage that people can see where they're at on the map, some nearby features or amenities, maybe it could be historical or informational, educational type signage, and this would be scattered throughout the destination development plan. A beacon, some large element, maybe tall, that people can see off in the distance, and kind of piques their curiosity and wants to get closer and inspect and figure it out. What is that might draw them in? A tower, could be a clock tower, could be something else, just again something tall and visually inviting to come explore. Or sculptural, we have a lot of artists here in the area, and could we incorporate some sculptural elements, including possibly some Native American coordination with Squaxin, for example, to get some of that into a beacon or some sort of gateway to draw people in. Arbor or archway, maybe integrating some of the greenery or landscape into an archway or tunnel that might, again, draw people down that path. Maybe that is an architectural archway, something more structured or built as opposed to organic and growing. Artistic markings, maybe there's some pavement markings or inlays that help guide or direct people down a path or invite them to explore a little further. And then plazas, maybe there's something at the end where there's a gathering of people or event that would be inviting, so you see that off in the distance and want to go and check out that plaza, and helps draw you further down into the development. So one other aspect that we were looking at, and we've addressed this earlier on, is the sea level rise. So kind of a refresher, if you will, of what we studied very early on in our first outreach. So the different components that we can use to treat sea level rise, and we're not saying each one of these has to be applied or one specific measure has to be applied, but I think this is site specific and should be looked at holistically for the whole development. But in reality, each site is special, each site is different. So depending on the use and what's going on that site, some different measures should be applied. So raising the streets, which you might see here, is, I guess it's more of an elevated walkway really, but potentially raising that street, so then that would help provide a barrier to any inland development. Raised landscape, a berm or some sort of kind of raised platform area. Flood walls a little more solid and definite along the water edge. Raising the buildings, so basically getting the building up out of that floodplain. Living shoreline, more kind of natural approach to address sea walls or sea level rise, and then kind of a temporary solution where maybe there's the sandbags because it's so infrequent. But I think with the future, that might not be a great solution long-term planning wise. This is shown as temporary, but this is more of a permanent fixture, but is just temporarily deployed during sea level rise. And then once the water recedes, that barrier would be removed and the business would go back into operation. So we included a few examples of some sea level rise measures as what could be for this site. Again, we don't have a particular solution for the whole project or each site, but just wanted to be open to the potential and also educate the public that there are lots of ways to address this concern. Another example of some living seawall features or kind of this more defined bulkhead type application. Here's an example of a lower pathway, which we do have along the waterfront there. And then if we were to have a raised landscape area, how that would kind of mitigate the sea level rise that we might be experiencing. So moving forward, we're going to basically take this PowerPoint into our third public outreach. I'd like to get your feedback on some of these items and just see if there's things that you recommend as far as revisions or additions, but just again, want to get your feedback. This is the development plan. You've seen this all along. We have broken this out into individual sites. So the idea is we can take an overall plan and then have a blow up of each individual site, and then that down the road would be able to be marketed to potential interested developers. This is, you saw this early on, these are the linkages and connectors. So the green, maybe these are broken out pathways or linkage gateways along between these development sites that would allow for pedestrians to go from that waterfront edge back into the kind of inland portion and then ultimately connect back to downtown. We had this street here as a linkage, but I think after discussion with several of you as well as the public, I think the question being, why not make Capitol more of the main linkage? So we're looking at that as the main connector from downtown. There are some other components or aspects here further to the east that we can fold in. I think this is probably going to be the main connector. So here's an example of taking each individual site. This, for example, is site A. We've got a blow up. So here's the approximate area, breaking that down into acres. So 93,000 square feet, 2.13 acres. Currently, it's being used as a parking area, has an office building, and it's also kind of undeveloped. So we're going to offer some potential use of a hotel, sailing center, or mixed use. We're going to, again, do this for each individual site. This is just one example. It's zoned as urban waterfront, so we're explaining all of the municipal code requirements, allowable building height and setbacks, none, shoreline 100 feet with 50-foot vegetation conservation area, and allowable coverage up to 60%. So basically trying to give the data facts, if you will, for each individual site. So moving forward, we can look at these further and start to do a feasibility study, for example, on each site, what would work best for that site. And down here is a few reference images, examples of what that might look like. So a hotel, sailing center, or even a mixed use type building. Another example, site D. This is where we've earmarked the administration building for the port. Again, just kind of going over the area, current use, potential use, and then some of those visual examples shown below. And then site E, this is another one. This is the potential RV site location that we were looking at. And what is the current use? Basically marine office, parking, dry storage, undeveloped, potential use, RVs, resort, mixed use, light industrial, possibly another alternate site for a sailing center, for example. So we're looking at basically what can go here, some potential use. This isn't the recommendation of this has to have one of these potential uses on this site. This is just a recommendation of what could go there. The port wants to send off the message that they're open to other potential ideas as well. If something great comes along, they're definitely going to entertain that as a use. And then we do have a couple of overwater sites. This is overwater site 2, overwater site 1, that is the KGY radio station. So we're looking at what could go here as well, like a commercial, maybe that's a seafood dock with a attached restaurant or something, museum, a cultural center. So again, we wanted to offer this as a potential development area. Another consideration might be that this remains as is for future planning, and there's potential even to combine overwater sites 1 and 2 into one larger overwater facility. So getting to next steps and opportunity, I just wanted to go over where we're headed and then start to get some feedback. If there's some slides you want me to jump back into, I can go start looking at those, but just wanted to kind of open this up to the group now to get some initial feedback.
So Amos, Tim Stokes here, South Puget Sound Community College. I think going forward with, I mean, these are all great concepts and ideas, but it seems to me it would be helpful in guiding some of the discussion and input if there was an outcome statement from either the port or the commission about the project will include essential elements, cultural, educational, recreation, business, and revenue, just so it's kind of contained a little bit. I think it's always easier to I work with a lot of college presidents, and you have to contain us a little bit by giving us some outcome statements, or we just, we have trouble putting things into categories. The other thing I would say is following up after some outcome statements are some guiding principles of what the commission and the port feels are essential. You know, sea level rise, educational centers, connection to the tribes, just some guiding principles I think would help guide feedback from the public a little bit.
Great, thank you, Tim.
This is Mark Daly. I've got a question and a comment. The question is, Amos, when you were presenting, you mentioned a third public outreach effort. And so a clarifying question is this second survey that's out, is that the third public outreach effort, or is there something that's then coming?
Sure. The third public outreach is basically this PowerPoint that we've generated. So it's kind of a summary of what we've heard, where this thing is headed as a development plan, and that is happening on the 20th. So that will, we won't be able to include the survey data that we've received, but we will include this survey that's currently ongoing.
Okay. And then the comment I had is, when I have taken this second survey, and one of the questions that I noticed is at least mentioned in the PowerPoint, and what that is, and I can't tell you which slide to go back to, but it was one of the ones that was talking about asking for your preference on what the shoreline should look like. And And one of the things that I had as a question as I was filling it out is how do these different options fare in the face of sea level rise? And later on, you have a slide, it's not the one you're on now, but you have a slide that included a figure that shows how the living shoreline and such will likely be underwater. And so the question that, so the comment I have is, I felt like that was missing information as I was filling out the survey, is how viable are these different alternatives? And so I noticed when I was done that living shoreline is doing very, very well in the survey, but is it viable given sea level rise? And so that was a concern I had, is when we've got public filling this out, do they have enough information to understand what some of the trade-offs are and the feasibility or viability of some of these options?
Sure. This is Ron Thomas, Thomas Architecture Studios. And one of the things I can tell you is that any final solution will likely incorporate a combination of all of these options. A good example of this is the work we did for the Thea Fossa Waterway in Tacoma. If you walk that, you're going to basically see all of these options. Some of the sites in the master plan that Amos just showed you, some of them are quite tight. They don't allow for very broad solutions. Others, the southern end of our site is a good example. The Billy Frank Jr. Trail borders right adjacent to the water. So maybe that focuses more on near shore restoration, a more natural look. Some of them, Site D, right adjacent to the marina, that might have a little bit more of a hardened solution because we have to deal with access to the marina. And so I do believe soliciting public input is a good start, because if they tend to prefer one over another, that's telling us this is important in the public's eye. So again, in response to your question, they're all viable. It's just not all are viable for every site. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I guess I'm just noting that that figure that's included in the PowerPoint but wasn't included in the survey is a helpful piece of information.
Can I don't know if we're just jumping in, Amos, or
Perfect.
This is Leonard Bauer at City. I wanted to follow up on both those comments a bit, and then I have a couple of my own. I guess on the shoreline solutions, yeah, there's a very large amount of information that's still going to need to be done to assess those under, once we get into the shoreline master program and permitting and things like that. Hardscape solutions are really tough. There's no way around that. And if there are hardscape solutions, it's likely that there will be some sort of a restoration component somewhere else. So Ron's point about different solutions in different locations is a good one, because it's likely that there will be some sort of restoration or mitigation type measures to offset if there are hardscape solutions in another place. And of course, the sea level rise implications, I agree with Mark on that. They really should be out there. This is almost like a visual preference survey, which is, one level of information, but there's a whole lot more for people, that you probably can't get into in these surveys. But just being clear with the public that there's a lot more work to do probably would be helpful. On the guiding principles idea that was brought up earlier, that's a really good idea, I think. And one of those I would encourage because we talked about it several times, was being connections back to downtown. How do we connect this area back to downtown? How do we make it easy to move back and forth? Is something we've talked about that I would hope would be included in those. And along those lines, I just want to make sure that we keep in the forefront the city's plans to do a bike connector route down Washington Street. While Capitol is fine and good as a connector, certainly for vehicles and pedestrians, but the bicycle, we're looking at Washington Street ultimately in the long term as a dedicated bike route, as well as the Cherry Street path that will be going through the development that Walker John's working on there. So it'd be great to show those or mention those in some way. And it also might be helpful, I think, to be clear about to what extent the port might consider short-term uses, interim uses, temporary uses while looking for the long-term use, or is that an option for some of these sites or not? Because I think that's helpful for people when they're considering things as well in terms of their feedback. And just one more comment, and that is in terms of the process. That forum next week for the public is great. You'll be getting feedback on that. It looks like after that, the plan is to go straight to the commission with a final draft. And it seems like there might consider some opportunity for the public to see the final version or final draft that's going to the commission before it goes to the commission. Just kind of circling back with the people who've had all the input in the process is usually helpful in a planning process, and getting any last comments or a sense of the the feedback you might get before heading straight to the decision makers. So I may be off on my perception of what the process is, but if that's the case, I would certainly suggest one more step in there.
Yeah, Leonard, if I can address that, I think that is what I was speaking to earlier in the meeting, that the commission wishing to add additional members to this group, but also for us to have a couple additional steps in here. And so we'll be working on that. I don't expect it to add a tremendous amount of more time, but I think it's important that we do some of these kind of coming back to the participants of this group, circling back with them, as well as then giving the commission opportunity to give input before we come up with something that is final. I also think, speaking to your point of what I think what this plan is and isn't, and so in some ways I think that even the use of the term final plan has some it frames it a bit differently than I think how we'll actually use this product. I think it's more of a narrowing of the choices, and narrowing the universe of whatever we could do into some distinct choices that then as we move along with each individual site, as well as some other comprehensive things like connections to downtown, shoreline restoration, et cetera, that this is informing those choices. But it's not going to be on site B, we are going to do this within this time frame. It's more on site B, we'll have we're looking at this range of choices. We'll see what the marketplace tells us. We'll also look at all the other principles that we're looking at, addressing sea level rise, being environmentally sensitive, et cetera. So, but your point is well taken. And I think that the commission expectations are very much aligned with those.
Chuck Fowler from the South Sound Maritime Heritage Association. I guess knowing that the port has been for almost 100 years and continues to be part of a working waterfront. And we have a very popular community event, Olympia Harbor Days, which celebrates the working waterfront, tugboats, ships, and longshore workers. And so I'd kind of like to see in the landscaping connector part of that, for example, we are creating a tugboat heritage walk along the boardwalk. And I think although you have some connecting corridors there that are along streets, I think an important one is still the boardwalk for pedestrian use as a connector to downtown. And you can see it in the map there along the bottom, Percival Landing from Sandman, and then we'll have the new Parthia Tugboat Heritage Attraction at the entrance to the farmer's market. And then you have the arrows over to East Bay and to Swantown. there are already interpretive signs along that route. There's some at the Oyster House, there's some at the Harbor House in the middle of that, and there will be other interpretive signs along the Billy Frank Trail and then north to North Point. And there were shipyards at North Point, at Overwater 2 site and marinas. And so I think we want to include that in the whole plan. Ron referenced his work, his firm's work in Tacoma on the Foss Esplanade, Foss Waterway Esplanade. If you walk along that wonderful esplanade, you have landscaping, and in the landscaping, you have buried artifacts, larger industrial artifacts, which again harken back to the working waterfront heritage. I think that can be done here as well. I don't think we want to obliterate and gentrify that we didn't have an industrial working waterfront heritage. I think we want to celebrate that and celebrate all the people who are involved in helping develop that. So that's an emphasis area that I think we'd like to help with in terms of how this plan is developed.
Great, thanks, Chuck.
Hey, Paris McCluskey from Puget Sound Estuarium here. I wanted to ask a little bit, a question about, and I don't know if this is a question I should address to the port or to Department of Ecology about the Master Shoreline Program and the possibility of estuarine education organizations like ourselves being able to do some education, citizen science monitoring of restoration sites and those mitigation restoration sites, and if that's if we might have an opportunity to do some environmental education on those sites.
I would leave that back to maybe the port for future development. I don't see that as an issue, but yeah, probably something you would also want to pair up with Department of Ecology to make sure that they're on board with that. Because
I know those sites are kind of obviously not public access because they're sensitive sites.
Right.
But yeah, I'll check in with Department of Ecology about that too with the Shoreline Masters Program.
I think as the project moves forward and we start to look at kind of boots to the ground actual development, that's where that could come into play a little bit more.
Amos, am I allowed to speak? I'm not necessarily on the advisory committee and I want to be respectful of the process. So if I need to wait or submit written comments, let me know. But if I'm allowed to speak, it'd be great if I could just make a couple comments.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Yeah, good. Go ahead.
So my name is Dave Bonato. I'm from the supporters of Olympia Community Sailing and basically a group of us trying to work towards a sailing center. And I just want to mention that Rachel Jameson did reach out to us as a select stakeholder, and we had a pretty vibrant conversation about a sailing center, just to sort of update that slide.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
I want to note that, you know, a lot of the comments talk about sort of access to, you know, the water, small boat launching, rentals, potentially for small boats. And a lot of that does sort of get encompassed in a sailing center. And I think there's a lot of interesting sort of proposals put forward and a lot of potential collaborations. And I think some of the nonprofits sort of talked about that. And a lot of those folks are on the call. And I think there's a potential evolution of a nice synergy that could be very productive for getting people to the waterfront and sort of experiencing sort of the port in a different way. So I just need to say that. And then, you know, in terms of some of the site development, I mean, a sailing center can go only in specific locations where there's the ability to launch a boat. And if you're renting boats, you really want to launch into a place where you can start sailing pretty quickly. So some of those sort of concerns and considerations down the road, I think it'd be great to sort of talk about them. And then, you know, I think there's just, you know, the idea of collaborations. I think, you know, those are going to take a little bit of time and hopefully there's some patience in the development plan for those collaborations. So thanks.
All right, thank you. So there's a few more of you on the advisory board that haven't had a chance to weigh in. Now is a great opportunity. I don't know if start calling you out by name if no one wants to volunteer. Any comments?
Amos, this is Patty at the Children's Museum. Couple thoughts. First of all, can you just refresh my memory on the public input on the 20th? Did a link go out for that meeting?
Yes, so a flyer went out, and I could issue that to you or make sure that that went out to you as well. But
I know that some of our board members would like to participate, and so I just needed to be refreshed on whether that was open to everyone.
Yeah, so that is a public outreach meeting, so all public is invited to that.
Okay, great. And then the other thing that I just wanted to comment on that may not be as evident to the public, but and it's even caused me to have questions. When you show us, for example, the overwater site, I can't remember if it's, it's the old one with the old docks on it. I'm just wondering realistically, having worked with ecology for the cleanup on the site that we're on, I don't know what hoops have to be jumped to actually be able to develop on that site. And I also know that it's near the port's secured area. And so I'm just wondering how realistic it is, if it would really truly need to be a major development effort to build over that site. And whether or not the port wants to get into that now, but I know that those kinds of questions have come to me and I really can't answer them. So just something to think about that. And I think this goes back to earlier comments about what is realistic. And so it may be that you do nothing more than preface the opening with, many things can happen and we're looking at all possibilities, right? And back to what Sam said, that this isn't a prescribed outcome, that this one thing will be here. So I just wanted to put that out there that as I'm out and about in the community, those are the kinds of questions. And then the last comment I wanted to make is on the last survey number 2, I felt tugged on some of the questions because just a simple one. For example, on tree lined versus another, well, I want both of them. I want a tree lined that's also pavers, let's say. So, it was hard. I felt it like I had to stop and think several times, and I didn't want to give up my 1 or number 3 answer because I wanted both items. But I appreciate what Ron said, is that likely we will have many of these elements throughout the development. So that could also be reinforced in the comments too. Thank you.
Oh, just to clarify, so basically you're suggesting reinforce that these multiple kind of solutions to the individual problems. So a lot of these features could be included in the overall development plan.
Yeah, because when you're filling that survey out, you feel like you're choosing something that you don't have a chance to say, but really we could do both of these.
Right.
I'm going to add something to Patty's comment that the commissioners and staff are paying attention and listening over these last several months to this process. And things like overwater site number 2, that's not even originally in our study area, but enough comments have been made about that Amos shows the slide, so it makes people aware, sends the commissioners the message that, hey, people are asking about this. Then you get into later stages of, is this even possible? It's incredibly difficult, as you know, for doing any development over water. But it might lead to, in time, this idea, if you have overwater coverage, that can potentially be combined with other overwater coverage on another site, and you can actually gain a larger footprint. Even if this site is difficult, it's too close to the industrial area, whatever the issue might be. The takeaway here is we're in the stage where the port is listening, adjusting, adding more advisory meetings. We'll see if any more public meetings are added. That's in the chat comments. And Amos, if you have a chance to take a look at some of those, folks want to see the public have a chance to see. And again, there is no final plan, but whatever our outcome of this process is, they want the public a chance to see that before it goes back to the commissioners for their discussion and approval. So I admire the port for being this open and wanting to continue the dialogue even further. Clearly, they want to kind of gauge the pulse of the public, and your advisory, the advisory committee are an important part of that as well. So all good comments.
Hi, Lisa with Lot Clean Water Alliance. I would just echo some of the other comments that Sam, I really appreciated your explanation that this isn't really intended as a definitive master plan, but
Right.
more as an opportunity to inform future decisions. And this idea of trying to balance public preference with what's really practical and what's really realistic, and just some of the hard lessons that that Lot has learned in our areas around our treatment facility, and that of course the public is going to prefer natural looking landscapes and softer sort of landscapes. And we have just run into a lot of challenges with that and dealing with issues that are prevalent in the downtown area presently. So trying to balance the practicality where hardscape might be more easy to manage in terms of maintenance and even safety issues versus public preference for softer. And similarly with sea level rise, being involved in the planning effort with the city and the port, we recognize that the public really tends to prefer the idea of living shorelines, but that there's a limitation there about how far that can take you into the future as sea level rise becomes more prevalent and higher in elevation.
Amos, this is Todd Cutts. Can I weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to be a broken record here from last meetings. Just want to emphasize, love to see uses within the master plan and kind of the development envelope that complement, that don't compete with downtown interests. So in particular, dining, retail uses, we are challenged in the downtown core to, make sure that we're successful in that regard right now. I think there are plenty of uses, and I'm sorry I missed the first 20 minutes, so you may have addressed this, but hospitality, office, residential uses, all great complements. Thank you.
Perfect. I was going through the comments, and I've noticed a few even in the survey about including Squaxin as part of this effort. And we do have, as Sam mentioned, Ray Peters as part of this advisory group. Ray, I don't know if you have any other comments or feedback you wanted to weigh in on at this time.
I don't, I just would say that again, and I've cautioned people who've reached out to me that this is a process. This isn't etched in stone, and there has to be due diligence and assessment. And I appreciate somebody had put me in some text as leadership, and I corrected them that I work for the leaders. I'm not an elected official, so I asked them to put the chairman, Chris Peters, on there. But I appreciate the efforts and the dialogue and the input. And apologize, I was just got on late here. I had to attend to some legislative duties.
Sure.
I will add that, some people will have good ideas, in regards to, we should have a carving shed, we should have a museum, a cultural interaction. And those are all things that we discussed with the port. We enjoy a good relationship with the port in the city of Olympia. So those discussions are always ongoing. So the tribe doesn't feel left out. Those are things that we'll continue to pursue. And so much of this is timing, and just appreciate that we can be part of this process.
Thanks, Ray.
Hi, Amos. This is Noreen Light. I had asked the question in the chat and Sam replied, so I wanted to make sure that others heard or saw that the RV park idea is already in the port budget. So it's obviously gone beyond, here's an idea. Is there a design plan that you can share with us so that we have a better sense of what's being proposed there? We live aboard full time in the marina, so the RV park will be our next door neighbors. So we want to be able to see that and share that with the others in the marina and get a better sense of what's being planned there.
Sure.
Sure, yeah, and I can answer that. So the RV park is included in the port's 2021 capital budget, and right now staff is addressing permitting issues with the city, and so and that will affect how the proposed layout would go. So we do not have a draft design that is ready for a public input on, because we're in the very early stages of looking at where the exact setbacks would be, making sure that the RV use would be permitted with the current code and shoreline designations. So we're working through some of those permitting issues. Once we get through those, and we're actually now just developing kind of a critical path timeline for a development of this. And so we'll be presenting that to the commission in our retreat coming up in February, when we expect to have the release of some preliminary designs to the public. So don't quite have a timeline for it, but it will be coming coming up, and we're doing outreach.
So that site is not actually open. You're not open to any other ideas for use of that site. This is on the track already.
It is currently being planned, and the commission has approved this for development for the RV park. Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. That isn't what we understood, so thank you.
Okay.
And then one thing I can add, Sam can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think kind of hinted back to what Leonard brought up early on, is that could this be a temporary short-term use, and then a future development might come along that might be more appropriate, and then that would happen on that particular site.
That is correct, and that is one of the things that I have, as the director, have thought of. When I look long term, 30 years from now, do I personally and professionally think that this is kind of the highest and best use for the property? Possibly not, but in the interim, to be able to provide a very popular use right now. We see RV or use of RV recreation and camping has grown tremendously, particularly in this time of the pandemic, and every market indication is that growth and demand will remain such. But this use does not preclude some other type of use in like a 10-year time frame, et cetera. So because the infrastructure investment in a RV park is such that you don't end up with a lot of sunk capital cost, and so you could convert it to a different use at some point in the future.
So interest of time, we are at 11 o'clock, so that's kind of the hour that we've been allotted. I'll remain online if there's some other comments that the advisory group wants to provide me feedback on. or if you want to send me some email or other comments that way, I'd be happy to hear them and see if we can incorporate that into this outreach for the third public outreach presentation. Unless there's any other closing comments, just want to say thank you for your time. I appreciate your ability to be part of this advisory group, and probably be receiving some email coordination either from me or Sam in the future about, as she mentioned, the potential extension of this meeting, maybe 1 or 2 more meetings. Sam, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Echoing your comment of thank you everyone for your participation. Again, I realize that there are many demands on people's time and attention, so I'm very appreciative of both. And we will be reaching back out to this group with the amendments to our schedule, additional meetings, et cetera. So you'll expect to be hearing from us soon. We just got this direction from the commission on Monday, so we'll be readjusting that and getting that back out to you. And thank you in advance for your continued participation. And I will also echo Ron Thomas's comments of absolutely, we are in the listening mode right now, and so there's a lot of information coming in, and really what I'm trying to do is to sit back, take in all that information, and then we'll start going through the process of selection. With that, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.